Hello and welcome to the Edtech podcast. I'm your host, Philippa Wraithmell, and today we're exploring the journey of an educator. We're thrilled to have Ben Whitaker, a visionary in the field, the ideas guy. He's joining us today, talking all about his roots as a religious studies teacher, as well as co-hosting eduFuturist podcast and their roadshow. Ben shares his unique insights into how technology is transforming education. Discover the power of critical thinking, the role of AI, and what the future holds for learners and educators alike, as well as his own personal journey on how he has got to where he is today. So get ready for an episode packed with inspiration and innovation from the fantastic Ben Whitaker. Hello and welcome, Ben Whitaker, to the Edtech podcast. How are you? For our international audience, please, could you share with everybody who you are and what you do?
Hello, thank you for having me on the podcast. Been a long time viewer in this space. I am a former religious studies teacher and senior leader in UK schools. Currently now wear two hats. One is as the co-host of the eduFuturist podcast and our events and stuff. So in a similar space to what the EdTech podcast is. And also I work supporting organisations to think differently, usually around tech and AI. But it's not exclusively around that. Sometimes it's around mental health, authenticity, strategy. And I do that under the banner of the ideas guys. Yeah. And it's speaking at conferences, coaching, workshops, a few other bits, keep myself busy.
Absolutely. And you definitely are very busy. Actually, just to come to your past, really, of being an RS teacher or an RE teacher, what would you call yourself, RE or RS?
I call myself RE, but lots of people called it RS.
Depends on what school you're in, doesn't it? I think we did RE at school, and it was, no offence, but one of the most dullest of all of the subjects. And I say that as a vicar's daughter. I should have probably enjoyed it more. But actually, more often now, I hear of it as being this debate-driven, this very vocal, this opinions. It's more theology, more discussion, more kind of, not having one quantified argument or one focus, but actually so many. Do you think that kind of passion and that sort of grounding is what puts you in really good stead for being a coach, speaking on stage, being able to have these really deep discussions with leaders?
Yeah, I do think so. I still think there's lots of schools that deliver RE or RS in that space. There's lots of really, really good RE teachers as well. Interestingly, when I first started teaching, it was very discursive, very much a philosophy. What do you think about this? Big topic issues. And then there was a curriculum review and it went very much, here's a really strict curriculum that we need to follow, which caused, I suppose, a little bit of a change in that space. But I still kind of kept philosophy, theology, ethics style, discursive teaching. But absolutely, I think it has set that whole trajectory of what I do. And some people say to me, how do you go from teaching make-believe? I don't mean that offensively. How do you go from teaching make-believe to teaching ones and zeros and technology? How does that go? And actually, I think the thread that goes across it all is that ability to do critical thinking, that ability to look at things from a variety of viewpoints and be able to develop judgment and values and trust and other things like that. So I do think that's come out of that RE classroom.
Yeah, I mention it more so because probably in the last 2 years I've met, I probably can't count on my hands how many people work in EdTech space who've actually taught RS or RE in school. And I think that's really interesting. I actually bumped into someone at a conference who was giving a keynote, which was incredibly deep and futurist and thinking, very broad brushstrokes, to find that actually my dad had coached him to become a vicar. And it was like the most bizarre thing. But I find this real correlation. And from talking to people more and more, and I just sort of feel like there is a real, this ability to discuss the unknown, the possible. And really, I guess that kind of brings us to eduFuturists. Like, that's what you talk about, right? That's the premise of it. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so eduFuturist started, this is funny, it's 10 years old it was 10 years old in February, and we started as a podcast of two, actually we were both RS teachers at the time, two tech teachers, or teachers who were interested in tech, and it was designed, and we called it In the Studio with the EduTech Project. It's just absolutely the worst name for a podcast in the world, but it started as these are some tech tools we found. We want to help people use them that weren't using them because it's relatively early in that space, right? And so it was that very much for a long time. then we moved it into a broader, we found ourselves in that conversation around what does the future of education look like? And we're not just talking 10 years time, but we're also talking today, tomorrow, next lesson. So what does the future of education look like? And then interestingly moved into education full stop. So we're not talking just school. We're talking about all the wraparound education services and learning that happens beyond compulsory school and university, learning development in businesses and in your own professional lifelong learning. So the principle around eduFuturist is how do we shape what the future of education could look like? And it's no surprise that a lot of the conversations become around technology, but it's not the only thing that sits in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you are dealing with, this kind of, for a lot of people, especially 10 years ago, very much unknown, very much kind of, what could be, and the hope really that of what it could bring to classrooms. Does it still baffle you? Because it really baffles me that some teachers don't use even some of the most basic EdTech tools. Those little things, those little tiny things that for you and I become really normal 10 years on, longer. Does that still baffle you?
It does and it doesn't. I think my first reaction is it does baffle me because I think the time save and the efficiency and the fact that I've got tools that help me with everyday life, but also teaching. I don't think I could teach without it. And interestingly, I don't think many teachers do teach without it. They just think that EdTech means PowerPoint, putting it on Teams, putting a message on Teams. And it could be all those things. The flip side is that it doesn't surprise me because of a number of things as well. I think because the pace of change is so high and the teachers are like, well, it's this. And then by the time they go to use it, it's this. And then there's another tool and there's another thing out there. I think the reason why a lot of people don't do is just because there's an overwhelm of I don't know where to start, I don't know what there is. And the other thing is there is this narrative, isn't there? And it's funny for us that in that EdTech space, there's a narrative that somehow if a student does something on screens, it's not as effective, it's not as efficient, it's not as good learning as if they with a pen and a piece of paper. And the third thing that ties to that is the fact that the assessment model across the world is still generally sitting in a room for 2 hours on your own with a pen and a piece of paper as a memory test. So therefore, why would people embrace educational technology when they know that the measure that they're getting measured on primarily as a teacher, and the students in their class is an analog test? No, it doesn't matter how good you are at EdTech because you're going to sit and do it with a pen and a piece of paper.
Yeah, so true. But then it just helps so much, doesn't it, of you remembering that? I know I will audio things that I've written to listen to them so that I can understand and comprehend them. So it just, I think it's so interesting. And I wonder over the years with eduFuturists then, the conversations, what are the most common things that have kind of almost come back round and kind of keep coming up? Over the 10 years, what do you think that would be?
Well, I think I'm smiling because every year at we do an awards event that we've been doing for years. It's an annual thing. The next one we've got coming up very soon. And we write and produce a trends booklet, which is the 3 or 4 key things that we've seen across the year in the podcast and our events. And interestingly, I was reviewing the last few years as I was writing the stuff for this year. And there's so much crossover in terms of what the themes are, what really matters. Absolutely. The biggest one for me is the concept of a wolf pack. And we've been saying this, we've been saying this as eduFuturists for a little while. That Rudyard Kipling poem, The Lower the Jungle, basically the idea that the strength of the pack is the wolf and the strength of the wolf is the pack. That in education, that we've created a comparison with performance tables, with ranking, with all the other things that go with it. But actually the thing that really matters and will matter for the future of education is how we do this together, and that we're lone educators. And I think the idea of it takes a village and is working together is definitely sure. Second thing that kind of resonates really is around how technology in most senses won't replace teachers. In fact, I do think some technology has already replaced teachers because kids are learning on TikTok and kids are learning on YouTube and whatever else. So the teaching has been replaced, not necessarily the teacher. I'm very careful around that. But interestingly, because how many teachers then, the phrase that we've been using there is around how technology won't replace teachers, but teachers who use technology are likely to replace those that don't. And that's been a theme that whatever that technology is, those that embrace that change. And I think the other bit that sits in there is around there's this real tension between lots of dichotomies in education, between knowledge versus skills, between agency versus control and safeguarding. And as if they're two opposites, they're absolutely not. From this extracurricular versus core curricular versus the core standard development of robust rigor and extracurricular nice things wrap around sort of skills and soft skills. It's like there's these dichotomies all the time. And it's almost like if you're in that camp, you've got to believe that. And if you're in that camp, you've got to believe that. And what we're finding is that we think the future education then will have that real sense of both and rather than either or. And I think that's a philosophical position that sits in there. And the thing that I reckon is quite interesting, considering me and Steve, who do the EduFuturist podcast together, have just finished the book that's coming out in the summer, is the idea of pick and mix education. And we think that the future education is going to be pick and mix. So the book's written to parents, and dialed into all of that is the idea that parents have almost, and I don't mean this disparagingly, I'm a parent who does this as well. We almost hand over education, and that is shifting across the world where teachers are being expected to do all sorts of things. Whereas in parenting, what does the holistic education and learning for your young people look like? So sports clubs and other extracurricular activities, mentoring, coaching, all the things that sits with it. And we're thinking that the future is likely where parents have got a little bit more control and say over that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I read a book quite a few years ago now called Boys Adrift, and it's a psychology book around bringing up children. And there is one called Girls Adrift as well, but the original one was Boys Adrift. And it was about that idea that slightly before that, but that not all of your children need to go to the same school, because the same school is not going to be right for all of your children. And actually, we're putting lots of labels on children, but perhaps it's the setting and perhaps it's not necessarily that environment that suits them. Whereas there might be a school down the road that is really great for them. And yes, logistically, it's going to be a bit of a nightmare, but actually for that child and for their development and their growth, the difference in the way that something is delivered or perhaps something is shared or perhaps the curriculum is laid out suits them in a way that means that then they can understand, they can learn, they feel like they belong, as opposed to just, oh, that's the school that we all go to because it's the school that's in our catchment, or it's the school my brother went to, or whatever it happens to be. So I can absolutely see that. And I think we now are so aware that school shouldn't just be sat in rows, that it should be so many more things, and allowing students to really have that agency over their learning, that these are important questions, I think, to kind of make parents think, because ultimately we're also in a system where we are programmed to go, my child is 5, they go to school, this is what happens, they then need to do X. Oh, if they can't do that, there must be something wrong. What do I do? And actually, that's not the case. There are millions of children, even in the Middle East where I am, that are homeschooled. And there's communities of it who do it. And there's lots of different schools for lots of different environments. And as there are all over the world, I was always quite jealous that I wasn't in the UK to send them off to forest school. So that always sounded lots of fun. I'm not sure desert school here would be quite as much fun, especially not in the summer. I'd love to know, where do we find those books? So just before we kind of come to close off that, where do we get those resources?
So edufuturist.com, so edufuturist.com is where everything that we have. So the podcast is there, the books, the blogs that we write, and the roadshow that we've just been running. There's a couple of webinars left, and then as it goes, what happens with version 2. So if you can get involved in any of them. The book, as it's not yet announced, it's almost, I suppose it is announced. We've started announcing that it's going to be ready. You'll find all that information on there, but we are actually developing a companion website at Pick and Mix, so as in pickandmix.education as well. So watch out for that. There's some things moving in that space. So yeah, exciting.
Fabulous. And tell us about the roadshow. Where have you been, and what have the themes been?
So we've been very privileged as EduFuturists. We've been wanting to do this for a while, but the Parent Pay Group worked with us to support where we were, the vision for that. We are basically, across the last 6 months, travelled to 6 UK destinations. That was, let's see, I'm going to remember now. We did Birmingham, London, Glasgow, Cardiff, Belfast, Newcastle. And we went to those 6 cities, and the way that we've run the roadshows has been, in typical EduFuturist fashion, it's been a little bit of a provocation. Or we had me and Steve as eduFuturists gave a bit of a provocation about where we were, and then we had some incredible humans who came and shared their provocations of what could this mean in the future of education. So the question really is what does the future of education look like with special reference to, and then we had these 6 in-person roadshows. So Send and Inclusion obviously came up, health and wellbeing, curriculum design, and what that might look like, particularly in the age of AI. Did some work around community and how do you develop community, and then staffing and staff retention, staff recruitment, CPD stuff has come up. But the cool thing around that is that we've also, because we know that everybody can get out of classes, and the fact that people that we wanted in that space to help develop those conversations and the thinking around it off the back of them, we've done 6 webinars as well, where we've had a whole host of incredible panelists around 6 key themes as well. We've got alternative provision in that space, and unions and professional organisations. So it's been a full on 6 or 7 months, but it's been really rewarding to pull the community together. We've got some exciting thoughts about what could come next out of it. So watch this space on that.
That's really exciting, and it sounds like there is something for every single person involved there. You know, whatever hat you wear in a school, there's something there for you to connect with. And brilliant that we're able to kind of again bring that back to be online, because again, it's so hard. Like, schools are such busy places. We want to learn, but it's not always as accessible. Awesome. And so I guess with all of this, it does give you a lot of ideas. Cheesy line in there.
Nice segue. Let's see what you did then.
Thanks. Tell us about your book.
Yeah, so I wrote a book that was released about 18 months ago called The Ideas Guy, which is a bit of a problem, because the reason why it's a problem, I'll start with the problem and then I'll talk about it, which is that sometimes people then say, oh, are you the ideas guy? Come and give us all the ideas, which I am quite good at thinking about things laterally and differently. But I also, the whole premise of the book is designed to help. Here's some ideas that other people have had. How do you develop your own ideas? So the book is designed, it's called The Ideas Guy. And in all of that conversation, it's 23, 24 people across the different chapters. Famous people. Some are a little bit controversial, some that are still with us, some that aren't, some that are in mainstream, some that probably less well known. And what I did is I did a little bit of these are the ideas that I think that they've developed, and then what can we learn from them? So each chapter is designed around the ideas framework. So innovation, digital, education, authenticity, strategy. And then within all that, there are some ideas that you might be able to put into your life, depending on where you are. You don't have to be in education. You could be in business. You could be in parenting, whatever you're trying to do. And are there some things that you can learn from these incredible humans? And like I said, I don't believe everything and agree with everything that they say, and I don't believe that they are the paragons of society. But I think it kind of, and it got me a little bit of controversy, if I'm honest, because I think some people are like, well, if you've got Elon Musk and Joe Rogan in your book, they are a little bit polarizing. And what my principle around it all is it's not about these people have got to be perfect, because we can learn from anybody. And that's what we need to do, rather than just like say, well, we're not going to learn from them because X. What can we pick up from them? So that's a principle of the book, really, helping you develop your own ideas from the ideas of others.
And I think as well, it is quite closed-minded to go, well, I don't like them, so I'm not going to listen to what they say, as opposed to going, I don't agree with them, but the way they're doing it is very clever. And actually that method, that thought process, that is something I can understand and maybe take on board with for a certain extent. It is more about that kind of side of it, isn't it? It doesn't necessarily, we're not here to get along with everybody. We're not here to agree with everybody. But actually, as a grown-up, it's more about us saying, okay, I appreciate that works. That's a clever method, a clever way of doing things and thinking outside the box. Was there part of the premise of selecting some of those people? Because obviously the more differing characters, the more people will resonate with at least one of them.
Yeah, I think, yes, the resonance, because I think some people will look at Maya Angelou and go, yeah, I get that. But then others people aren't into poetry, aren't into literature, and therefore would look at that and go, not sure. But then a digital person might look at somebody like Sam Altman from OpenAI and go, there's something to learn from him. And actually, it's playing out on the world stage, a lot of this stuff at the moment. So yeah, I think there is that ability for you to be able to find somebody that you think, oh, I like what they're doing. But also, like you said, to challenge your own thinking and to look at and go, I don't like them, but is there something I can learn from it? And I think there's a real strength in being able to hold that idea and hold the person and their idea as separate. The truth is that there's lessons to learn from all of them. And I have got 2, 3, 4 more books ready to go, pretty much, in terms of the thinkers and other people that could be in these spaces. But I think there's a challenge at the moment in terms of there's so much stuff out there. It's not about having more stuff, it's about what we do with the stuff that's there. So,
and that sort of brings perfectly really to what you do when you're not writing books, or when you're not eduFuturist or the ideas guy, sort of presenting that on stage. I mean, we first met in Bucharest, which was an incredible event to be at. And I know you've been all over the world, but when you're with schools, when you're with companies, groups of people, what does Ben Whitaker do?
That's a good question. I think one of the things for me that I've wrestled with, and I think it's important for listeners to hear this, is that I am a late diagnosed ADHD, and in that space, that I always thought that my thinking was, I was always out there because I thought of something that other people didn't, and then I'd actually be having 4 or 5 or more conversations going on all at the same time and didn't understand why. And then that diagnosis helped to put an explanation on that. Not an excuse, and it wasn't like, oh, I've got a diagnosis now, that's everything I need to do. But then it helped me to kind of rationalize and work through that focus and how to develop that focus. So what it then means is that when I go into an organization and they're looking to explore AI, or they might be thinking about their inclusion strategy, I get to do a lot of work in that inclusion space, which is wonderful. I ask good questions, and that's what the strength is there, is going to ask good questions, and then to say, okay, well, where does that leave you? Where are you with that? And then I've got 500 or 600 ideas. I don't want to come and say, here's what I would do, but it's that ability, I think, sometimes to help draw that out of other people by helping them generate ideas and by asking good questions.
Yeah. And I think, again, that sort of links back to everything. It's all those different conversations you're having, and that ability to have 5 different conversations around one narrative actually really helps in terms of strategy, because you're thinking about the problems, thinking about the exploration, thinking about what could be, and actually solving problems as well for people, and then just helping them to get to that point. So it's almost like having 4 or 5 of you in the room, surely.
Yeah, it can be. It's sometimes a bit noisy in here, in my noggin.
Oh, bless you. And I guess with that as well, like, what that must personally have been quite a journey for you to know. I don't know, because so as a dyslexic, I see big picture and then have to work backwards, and people find that really odd. I'm like, oh, let's do this, and this is how we do it, and it takes me a bit of time to get backwards, but that's kind of how I work. And again, people think that's odd, but when you put it into perspective of dyslexia or ADHD or anything, there is something to be said in, I understand myself more now, and I'm not as harsh on myself, because I used to be horribly critical of myself. And actually that takes quite some time. I guess that's probably been a bit of a journey.
Yeah, it does. And I still am my own biggest critic in that space. But it's also helped me by processing what this means for my kids. I've got 15 and 11-year-old daughters, what it means for my wife. I've been writing as part of my blog that I write on my website, a series around understanding my ADHD partner as a partner conversation. So what it feels like, the conversation I'm having with my wife, purely because when I talked about it quite openly and honestly at a couple of conferences, I had people coming up to me in tears and saying, I've never thought about being able to explain this to my partner. And then others were going, but my partner has got ADHD, doesn't know how to deal with it. What would you be advice, kids? And so I'm like going, hold on a minute. There's probably an opportunity to help people process it, and it's a journey. Like, I'm on a medication review at the moment because I get to about 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's definitely worn off. And so then what does that mean? Well, and for my wife and kids, that means something, because that starts getting annoying. It's been a bit of a process in my thinking, in terms of accepting that it's not a deficit. I hate the term ADHD as if it's a attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, like deficit disorder. It's like I've got, it's negative, and I think there's lots of framing at the moment around it being a superpower, which can be a bit cheesy. But the thinking of going, the noise in my brain, which the medication helps to think, but also how have I created processes to deal with that? So I write loads of notes everywhere. I have to-do apps everywhere. I have a calendar that is as tight as you can imagine, and I have a VA that checks in on me all the time to make sure. So I've started to develop them skills.
And I think it's that openness of the journey that really is helpful to other people, because I especially, growing up in the 80s, people didn't talk about stuff like that. It was just, it was stigmatized. And interesting that you bring up the whole superhero thing, because I feel like a lot of people are saying, in a similar way to the teachers who use tech will be the ones that survive. People are talking around people who have got additional learning needs, or, I'll say disabilities again because of SEND. But actually, if you've got ADHD, being one of the people who will lead the world, will lead these innovation, will lead, things, because actually we might have seen it as a negative, but when we now know more and more about it, if we can put mechanisms in place to direct all the thinking and to help support that person, got literally like 4 brains going and wild in there with ideas and things that can happen. And that's incredible. Like, it is a superpower to be able to think that quickly and that critically.
And it can also be a super curse in the nicest possible way as well, because then you overthink and you doubt and you look at 12 or 600 possibilities. And so my mind is going, I have to sometimes just go, right, make a decision. Sometimes I need to go, don't overthink it. Sometimes I need to sound that out with somebody else, and that's okay as well.
Incredible. I think an amazing journey to have come on. And I think it is for you, definitely. I feel like it's a real superpower, because it helps you to do so many things and to connect with so many people, that it's really amazing. And I don't think we'd want Ben without it.
Thank you. That's very kind.
That's okay. I wondered as well, like, just as a kind of closing question, where do you see eduFuturists? Where do you see the books? Where do you see all this kind of going in the next few years? And then just as a really just curious on my part, where's the best place that you've ever visited for a project?
It's hard to choose the best, but I always loved the Innovate EDU conferences in South Africa. So been over in Cape Town and Johannesburg. They've been pretty special. Maybe that's because I went up Table Mountain and just went, what? But you mentioned there about Bucharest. I think it's worth saying that the conference that Matthew Weems is putting together there, that AI Education, is pretty special in Romania, and I've been there a few times, and I think that's great. And what makes that really powerful for me is that I got to supplement that by working with some students in the school. So I went and did some workshops with students there. And as a teacher of high school students, and who doesn't get to work with students very often, that was pretty cool. Been doing that critical thinking and use of AI, that was pretty cool. So in terms of where I think it might go, I'm not entirely sure. I think one of the things that we are very excited about as eduFuturists is trying to look at how we build the communities beyond just one event here in a year. And there's a lot of community that listen to the podcast, that come to our events, that subscribe to the newsletter, all them other bits, but would look to do those regional spaces. So we're trying to build out what communities look like in the UK, and then potential beyond that as well, in terms of how these bringing people together really matters. So that's definitely part of it. I think there's at least one more book in the eduFuturist locker right now. And obviously just continue to keep growing that and shaping that future of education. We don't want it to be about Ben and Steve getting a platform. We want it to be, how does the community come along with that? But for me, I think I really like partnership and working on projects. I love going speaking somewhere, and it can be amazing speaking at conferences, and I continue to do that and will continue to do it, I think. But then longer term projects where we can see real change happen over a period of time, that's what I hope to see more of. So that's where I'd like that to be, whether that's in AI or whether it's not AI. I'm kind of cool with it. I don't want to think of myself as a one-trick pony in that space. So I think that's where I'd like it to go.
Incredible. And there are so many resources. Just again, quickly, if anyone wants to apply to be an eduFuturist on the awards that you have, could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, edufuturist.com/uprising26. That's for this year. And we'll be, the awards will be announced on the 25th of June, which is quite exciting. And then nominations and whatnot will be starting back end of 2026 for 2027. So please just watch this space on the eduFuturist space. It just moves. We've got one coming, and then we're already looking at venues for next year. It's like we haven't even done this one yet. So yeah, edufuturist.com.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for your time today, Ben. It's been wonderful speaking to you.
Thanks.
Well, thank you for tuning in. Well, thank you for tuning in to this enlightening episode of Ben Whitaker today. I love talking to Ben. Apart from anything, He makes me feel so happy that there are people like that helping others in schools and around the world with education technology. It's Ben's attitude towards everything that he does that makes it so at ease and allows people to really understand what they need to gain from education technology. He's a real inspiration, and I hope you found some inspiration from the stories and insights that he shared today. Through his journey, his own personal goals, but also his own personal journey with learning about ADHD and how that really drives his own passion and dedication, and also how it helped him to find out who he really was. Remember, the future of education really is in our hands, and embracing technology is the key to unlocking new possibilities. If you haven't seen one of Ben's roadshows or listened to his podcast, I implore you to do so. Check out his website, all listed in the show notes. And don't miss out on more exciting content. Please subscribe, like, and share the EdTech podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Join us on this journey of exploration and innovation every single week. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in education.